Hi everyone, I'd like to go ahead and welcome you all to our GetResponse webinars webinar. So as you know, probably all of you can tell, this is going to be a webinar all about the new exclusive GetResponse webinars feature. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And here at GetResponse, we know all too well the importance of webinars. We utilize webinars for our customers and our audience on both a weekly and monthly basis. We've got weekly recurring webinars that are kind of educational and help people learn how to use GetResponse, and also special monthly guest webinars with different marketing experts. And of course, GetResponse product webinars like this that you're seeing today to introduce new features we've got. These are really great for engagement opportunities with your audience, as well as lead gen opportunities to continue growing your list with new subscribers. With this in mind, we are so happy to offer webinars as an exclusive feature to GetResponse services. So in this webinar about webinars, we'll go through the feature itself and let you guys see how easy it is to really maximize and enhance your engagement with your subscribers, your new leads, and continue to grow your list. And as I briefly mentioned, of course, there's many types of webinars that you can host. Guest webinars with experts or partners in your industry, educational webinars on your products or your services or updates in your field, announcement webinars to give exclusive access to a new offer, maybe one-on-one training sessions, onboarding events, anything really where you want to get some type of message out to a group or even just one person online. But for now, let's just keep this in mind while we dive into today's webinar and learn all about GetResponse webinars. And so you'll see from the account here, we're going to start from the webinars drop-down menu and choose Create. And from here, you're going to give your webinar a title, anything that indicates what the webinar might be about. So I could say new feature demo as an example, but it could be anything. Again, that's easy to remember and kind of indicates what this is going to be about. And beneath that is going to be the webinar URL. This is very important. This is the unique URL for this particular webinar. So this is what someone would need to join your event. Of course, if someone has sent an invitation or a reminder to your webinar, that's how they'll probably most likely join. But also anyone who has this link and who joins at the proper time, and in case in a moment when I talk about passwords, you have a password. If they have that, then that's what they need to join. So the webinar is the webinar URL, of course, is pretty important. And so you can see that, the title that I gave the webinar is indicated there in the webinar URL as well. So you've got that set up. And then you're going to, of course, choose, the specific date and time for your webinar. So we could say this is going to be, let's say we're scheduling things pretty far in advance for December the 4th. And let's say I want to have it at 12 p.m. So all right, I'll select that. So that's your date and time for the webinar. And beneath that is where you can choose to enable or disable registration. See if you have registration enabled. Before someone joins your event, they're going to have to register for it. So whenever you send an invitation, they'll be prompted to register. And then once they register, providing their name, their email address, things like that, they'll be automatically sent a confirmation of registration message and be able to easily join the webinar from there. So that just kind of is an extra step for people to do before they can join the event. But if this is off, of course, again, all they need is the URL or, to join via the invitation at the proper time, and they'll be easily let into the webinar room. So this is totally up to you at this point. And you also have the option to send some reminders. So if you'd automatically like a message sent to your registrants before the webinar, you can choose that. You can see you've got some options here. Maybe I'll choose 30 minutes before the webinar. I'll just want one sent. And then you'll choose the reminder template. So these are going to be automated messages that are automatically sent out to your registrants at the time you dictate, and it automatically pulls, the webinar title and the start time and a proper join now button into it. So it just pre-fills this in. So you'll simply just choose a template in this instance here, and then the proper data will be pre-filled in and automatically sent out. And next is an important aspect of setting up your webinar. So click this Edit Webinar option, and you'll see some more options drop down. You've got the option to share this event on your Twitter or Facebook pages. Definitely a good idea. We really recommend getting the word out about your webinar on lots of different channels. So that way, again, you're really utilizing this as a lead generation opportunity to get people who are not currently signed up to your email marketing list to go ahead and do that once they, are totally impressed by your webinar. So it's a good idea to promote it on social media as well. And then here is where you're going to set up the access type. So you've got the option for open or password protected. So open means there's no extra steps. All they have to do is, join the room and they're in. But if it's password protected, which is a good idea maybe if you're doing like a one-on-one training session with someone in particular, or maybe somebody has people have paid to actually join your event, then you'd probably want to make it password protected. And that way anyone, who has the password can join, but obviously if they don't have the password, they cannot join. So you would just set up the example password. Anything you want it to be. Hopefully you'll make it a bit more complicated than that. And then of course the password will be automatically provided to people in the invitations, or you could manually give it to someone as well. And beneath that is where you're going to choose which campaign your webinar registrants, as you can see, if registration is enabled, and for your webinar attendees, if it's disabled, which campaign they should go to. So maybe you'll have a new campaign you set up in your account that's exclusively kind of for your webinar, leads and how you're going to actually manage those. Or maybe you want them to go to, a specific campaign in your account. That's totally up to you. But basically, here is where it's important to dictate where registrants and attendees should be sent to whenever they sign up or attend this event, which campaign they should be added to. And then there is this lobby message, which is just basically a waiting room. Before you open up your webinar room and people try to join it before you've started it, they're, of course, as often we are, put into a waiting room. So you could just put a message here, we'll get started shortly. Anything, any type of message you'd like to provide to people who are waiting to join, you could simply do that here. And from this step, we could actually choose save and exit, and technically, your webinar room is good to go. It is set up. You could start, promoting the link. You've got everything that you need. So you could click save and exit, and basically you would be done. But in this instance, and probably more commonly, you'd probably like to save and send an invitation. And so this is where you can actually send an invitation to your existing subscribers in your GetResponse account. It'll be very similar as you do a newsletter, if you've done that before, hopefully, in GetResponse. And so this is the option I'll show you here. So save and send invitation. So automatically you're brought to this page, webinar invitation settings. Hopefully, again, it looks familiar to those of you who have used GetResponse to send newsletters before. But this, it's a little different because it specifies here, of course, this is for an invitation. So the name is going to be, again, internal, just for you. No one will see this. So I'll say demo invite 1. So that'll just be kind of for me to manage. And then the subject. So don't miss out on this exclusive webinar. As an example, whatever you would like your subject to be. Set up your desired from field for this message. And if you drop down distribution settings, you'll see the additional options for click-through or Google Analytics, or if you wanted to share this invitation on Facebook or Twitter. So that's where you'll find those options as well. So I'll go to next step. And by default, you're brought to a section of webinar invitation templates. Of course, you still have access to the over 500 GetResponse pre-designed templates that you've got in your account, but just to make it a little easier, we bring you to these first in case you might like those. And you also could start from scratch and build your own, template as you would like as well. So it's totally up to you. But I'll choose a template here just for the sake of ease. So you can see it is loaded into the editor, and you can see by default automatically the name that you gave your webinar, and the time and the date is pre-included in the template. So it's pretty handy as well. So you can see that it's an invitation. You can see the name of it as well. And then at the end you've got the option again to join us. You've got the proper date and time and a sign up now button. But as usual with your newsletters, this is all completely editable. You have full control over every aspect and the look of this particular invitation and this message. So you can definitely edit this. You can change up how this looks. You can delete this text and change the format, change the font, change the color. You can change the placement. You could drag it around if you wanted as well to different parts of it. And if you happen to be kind of looking around this basic block section where you're kind of probably used to, adding in new text blocks, if you scroll down a bit, you'll see a new block that probably you've not seen before called Webinar. Basically, it's just a repeat of this information here. So if for some reason you did not like, this one, let's say here at the bottom, if you didn't like this one exactly like this, which again, you can edit, but let's just say I could delete it. And you could actually move over this here. And there's that same information again, just in a different format that you could edit. Again, you can change how the button is looking, change what text is actually on the button. Maybe you'd rather it say register than join. And so edit all of this to your liking and make it look, extra special and really tempt your subscribers into joining your event, okay? So this should be familiar for those of you who've used GetResponse before for your newsletters, and if you haven't yet, this should be no problem at all to get a handle with. You'll see by hovering and moving your mouse and clicking the different areas, all the editing options that you've got. So let's say, just for, brevity's sake, that this looks good. This is how we're wanting to look. And of course, as always, mobile preview is available as well, as with any message you send from GetResponse. So let's say that this is good to go. We are happy with this. We're going to move on to the next step. And again, you'll include your recipients. So simply choose, which campaign, or maybe your whole account, all campaigns, you would like to send this particular invitation to. And so let's say I'm going to choose all, just for a quick example. You can exclude recipients. You can select contacts manually. This example, I'm just going to choose myself really quickly and just go ahead and do a full send, but not send it unnecessarily to some of my colleagues in this account. So just to myself, but of course you can do this to a whole campaign or anything. And here's our message summary. So we could schedule it if we'd like for this message to go out later, at a later date or time, or send it immediately. So I'll choose to send it immediately. That's to myself, of course. And then we've got this little 60-second countdown just in case, I remembered something I didn't include or wanted to edit or something. You've got that time here. But you can see that it is going to be scheduled to go out in just, a minute or so. So I should be seeing that in my email here very soon. So with that, you have actually conquered the inviting stage of your webinar. So it's definitely time to start promoting your webinar, to really get the word out on multiple channels. Really spread the word and do what you can to get as many people as you come, because you of course want your existing subscribers to come and be engaged and learn from you, but you also really want to focus on promoting this on your social media pages, on your website. Maybe you've got partners in your industry that you work with that can kind of help you spread the word on their Twitter accounts or something. So it's definitely a good idea to really spread the word, really see if you can really maximize who you're getting there and really be able to get some new leads through that. So we've got our invitation gone out, we've got our reminder set up and all of that. So let's say the time has come just about and we are ready to kind of set up our webinar room and get familiar with what we're going to have in there. So I'm back here to Webinars, Manage, and so you can see you've got some options here as well from this Manage page. And so if I drop down, this is one we're working with, you'll see you've got the options to edit this webinar. So if you wanted to change some detail, you could do that here. Join as a presenter, which I'll do in just a moment so we can see the webinar room. Join as a participant, if you wanted to have a look from their point of view. Send a message to your registrants, you could do that. Generate the statistics or a PDF for the results of this webinar. You could delete it. You could send the invitation if you haven't done that yet, and also view invitation statistics as well. Because that's what I forgot to mention just really briefly. That invitation we just sent out, of course, as all messages, you can view the statistics for it via Statistics, Email Analytics, and view your most recently sent newsletter, or do it from here as well. So it's totally up to you. And you can be keeping an eye on how many registrants you've got, so you can kind of visit this page in the days before your webinar to see, oh good, I've got over 50 registrants or something. And then once you actually have your webinar and you host it, you'll be able to see your number of attendees, visitors to the site or visitors to the registration page and things like that as well. That's a way to be able to kind of keep track of it, both during or before your event as well. And again, here's that link I mentioned. So this is a link to the webinar room, but I'm going to just go ahead as a presenter. I usually like to just do actions, and then I'm going to choose this join as presenter. And it opens up in a new tab, and it starts loading, and it's loading everything and kind of getting me set up into my room. And here you can see the webinar room has opened up for us. And so every time you open up a room, you're going to be prompted with this same message here, basically letting you know that the waiting room is enabled, and if you just want to start the webinar now or to prepare and start later. Honestly, most commonly, you'll probably choose to prepare webinar and start it later, just so as you see as we go through some setup steps in a moment, usually you want to go ahead and have some time to prepare before it's open for everyone. But if you're kind of having just an impromptu quick webinar with somebody that you're meeting up with, you could of course just click Start Webinar Now, and then as soon as they join the room, they will be able to actually, join with you and not be held in the waiting room. So as I said, I'm going to go ahead and choose Prepare Webinar and start it later. And now we can see our webinar room as it is kind of going to be default shown to you each time you open it up. And so I'll make sure to go and give you a tour of every aspect of the webinar room and some important things to keep in mind as well. And so I'm going to take it one at a time with each of the pods, and then I'll go through the different settings and things you've got up here. And so I'll try not to jump around too much so we can all kind of keep it straight. And so the first pod is going to be the camera and voice pod. This is where you're going to be able to manage your own audio and video. So depending how it is that you want to be able to communicate with your attendees for your webinar, you'll be enabling your audio just right here by clicking on it, clicking to allow flash, and then you'll see it's loading for a moment, and then you've got the prompt audio is on. So whenever you're flashing green, you'll know that your audio is on, you can be heard. And if you drop this down, you've got the options to be able to choose your mic and speakers. For example, if you had a different microphone rather than your built-in microphone that you wanted to use, and you had it plugged in, you'd be able to see that here and make that selection. And of course, to mute yourself, you would just simply click it again. And so whenever it's got a red line through it, your audio is not enabled, and so no one would be able to hear you speaking. And so then you would just click it back on, and you're back on again. So that's a pretty simple way to be able to manage your own audio. And then for video options, you have the option to, live stream your actual, face talking, during your webinar. And so just the same, you would click on that again to be able to load the video going of your, let's say, your built-in camera on your computer or some webcam that you have plugged in. Or you also have these extra options to use an avatar. So if you click that, you'll see that there are some kind of, preset cartoon people who could be placeholders, or you could simply upload your own headshot or company logo or something from your computer. So you've got the option here to have in this pod either your live streaming face, so people can see you live, or perhaps just a photo. So that's definitely up to you. And just the same, you would be clicking this on and off to turn yourself on and off for your video feed. And whenever it's got the red line through it, you'll know that you are off. And beneath that, next to that is going to be the different modes. These are pretty straightforward. You can see they each have explanations under them, so I won't spend too much time just reading them to you. But as you can see, the default that's selected here is listen only, which means that all of your attendees by default are just there to listen. They don't have the option to be able to speak. So just you and the presenters. So you can see I'm the organizer. That's what you would be as the host of your webinars. And then if you've got any other presenters joining you, they can speak, but just your attendees would be listen only. And there's a couple other modes for presenters and for Q&A. So you can definitely check these out as well. But just honestly, for your typical webinar type of situation, you would usually be just doing this default listen only option. And now you can see each of the pods here that I'm kind of talking about. There's these additional little icons. And for these three pods, these icons, the settings wheel icon gives you some additional settings for each of the pods. And so I'll point out a couple of settings in each of them that's kind of particularly important. But I do recommend whenever you're kind of testing out the webinars feature, maybe before you host your big event, to go ahead and just click through these and kind of read through your options there to make sure there's not something that you're really, keen on having. That way you can be familiar. But of course, I'll point out a couple of popular options, of course. And additionally, you can, just like your browser windows, you can minimize a pod, you can maximize it, or make it to be full screen. So just like the kind of the same controls you have on a browser window, you have with the particular pod as well, for minimizing it from the room, maximizing it, things like that. So that's pretty typical for your camera and voice pod. So just remember, this is where you control your own audio and video. Beneath that is going to be the attendee list pod. And so this is where you're going to be able to see all of the people who, are in the room. And since we haven't actually started our webinar yet, remember I chose prepare and start later. If we had anyone in the waiting room, so anyone waiting to join our event, you would be able to see that here as well. And then whenever I would click start webinar, all those people waiting in the waiting room would be let in, and you would be able to see them listed here, their names, as attendees. And so this is just an easy way for you to be able to, get a glance and see who's there. And particularly something to keep in mind when it comes to the attendee list pod is this is a way that you can kind of, give maybe some specific settings or options for a particular user or attendee that you click on. So let's pretend we have someone in the room. Let's pretend this is not me. And it's someone you actually want to be presenting with. So a partner or somebody that you're hosting the webinar with. And so they've joined the room and they're an attendee. Now, if you want them to be a presenter and be able to have all the same controls as you do for the webinar, you would just click on their name. You see some additional options come up. And you'd be able to choose Make Presenter. Of course, I'm the organizer, so I already have this presenter status. But for anyone else who's joined you as an attendee, if you want them to be a presenter and be able to control their own audio and video and, help present with you, this is where you'd make them a presenter. So you can see there's some additional details here. You can, of course, see, login details of how they've joined, options to turn on their audio, to start a chat with them, to turn their video on, make them a presenter, as we saw, give them screen access, or some additional options here as well. So just keep that in mind. This is for any person that you click on their name in the attendee list pod. You're going to have those options. And attendees, of course, cannot click on someone's name and have anything happen. This is just someone that you or a presenter would be able to do. And additionally, attendees will be able to see this little icon here, and it's where they'd be able to create a status for themselves. And so you could see someone with a raised hand, for example. You could find them in the attendee list pod and click on their name and maybe start a private chat with them and say, "What's up?" or "Do you need any help?" or something like that. So attendees can see this. So if you did see some statuses here of your attendees in this pod, that's where it's coming from. And then you can kind of see a key here for what those mean if you're not quite familiar. And again, you've got this little settings wheel here for this pod. And one in particular that you may be interested in, a setting, is to hide this for participants. Maybe you do not want your participants to be able to see the name of everyone who's joined for some reason. If you click hide for participants, basically it means all they will be able to see are the name of the presenters who were there. They will not be able to see the rest of the attendees who are joining. So if for some reason you don't want that to be shown to them, you can very easily do that. Enable it there. Below that is going to be your chat pod. So this is kind of really the main source, I would say, for like interaction and communication with your attendees during a webinar. This is kind of the more typical form to do, for example, for Q&A sessions or for just checking in with people during the webinar, is the chat pod. And so it's quite straightforward. Attendees can be able to type messages to you. But an important setting I'll mention for this particular pod, as you can see there are a few, but in particular I'll talk about this Enable Moderated Chat option. When I click this, you can see this box came up. And this box would only be seen by me and, again, someone who is a presenter. And this helps make sure that your chat kind of stays on topic, because all of the chat submissions are going to be moderated. So you can kind of keep it on topic, and so people won't really be able to see kind of, unrelated or spammy or whatever type of chat submissions. So, of course, I'm the host, so I can type whatever I want in the chat pod and it would go straight through. But let's say an attendee has submitted a question or something. You would first see it here. You would see it prompted in your moderator tools, and you'd be able to approve it. If it's on topic in a chat message you want everyone to see, you would approve it. Or you could just simply delete or ignore it if you don't want, the rest of your attendees to be able to see it here in the chat pod. So, moderated chat is kind of a pretty standard tool that a lot of people use whenever you're hosting, pretty big events, just to make sure that your chat pod doesn't get off topic or, get a little inappropriate or something like that. So moderated chat is something to really keep in mind as well. And then quickly, I'll just talk about chat, because I did mention it a little bit here in the attendee list pod, is that you can start a private chat with someone. It's possible to do that, and it would just open up a separate tab. So if there was a presenter you wanted to have a private chat with separate from this main chat pod, or maybe an attendee who's raised their hand via the status, again, remember, you would just click on their name and click Start Chat, and a chat invitation would be sent to that person, and it would be opened up as a new tab here. So you'd have the two tabs for the main chat pod and for the private chat that you've got going. So that's a good way to kind of keep it separate from the main chat pod, but check in on someone if you need to. So these are kind of these three little accessory pods, so to speak. These are kind of different ways to manage your webinar. But this share pod here is, of course, really where you'll be doing your presenting. It's where the content of the webinar really is going on. And so you've got these additional options here. Now, probably the most common one you're going to use is called the presentation. So this is where, you'll be able to be going through your, PDF files or PowerPoints or videos or images. Basically, any file that you want to share or go through during your webinar, you'll be uploading it here. And this is a good example for why you would want to actually open up this webinar room, maybe 30 minutes or so before your webinar starts, just to make sure you have everything set up that you want and to get your files uploaded here. And so you can see we can upload it from our computer, and there is a bit of there's a 50 megabyte max for the uploads, but that way you can locate a document on your computer and get it uploaded to share. So I have a file on my computer I'd like to go ahead and upload, so I'm going to choose that. Let's see, it's right here. So you can see it'll just take a few moments to get it uploaded and converted, and then you'll be able to go through that, as it's the proper presentation that you'll be presenting to your audience members or for your attendees. So just take a few moments here to let that get going. And we can see here it is. Here's the file. And so this is what I want to actually be presenting today, so to speak, for the webinar. So I'm going to click open. And there we go. We see it's loading. So this is just your view of it. Your attendees will not be able to see the thumbnail previews. They can only see, the screen that you've got selected or the slide. And so this is just super easy for you just to intuitively just go through and click through and present. Go through your presentation exactly as you should, clicking through next, going back. So this should be quite straightforward, really. So this is probably the more common way that you'll be kind of utilizing the SharePod is to go through your presentations. And then you can close your presentation, do whatever you need to do. You can see there's an option to mark on it, to write on your presentation if you wanted to. There's an additional menu here for what type of colors you would like, the thickness of your pen, what kind of cursor you'd like, if you'd like it to be a text cursor, the pencil like we have, things like that. And of course I can delete that as well. There's a good back button here. This is a pretty straightforward tool for your presentations. You upload it and then it's good to go, and you'll be able to get that loaded and share it with your attendees. And now I'll talk about the other things as well here. So that's a presentation icon. So sharing your different types of files. Next is a whiteboard. This is a pretty fun, tool for, collaboration, maybe kind of some brainstorming graphically. And so just as you can see here, it's just a whiteboard where you can, get creative, maybe, as I said, do some brainstorming with your attendees. And if you would like for your attendees to have access to these tools and not just watch, you or the presenters engage with this, you would just click this collaborate button here. And then your attendees will be able to collaborate with you on this and have access to all these tools. And if you get something valuable from the whiteboard and you don't want to lose your good ideas, you can export this to a PDF. So if you just don't forget before you close this down, just to export to a PDF, and then you'll have access to this offline as well. And so this is a pretty cool feature, pretty straightforward. You can add an image to it, have text, different shapes, all of that as well. So that's for our whiteboard. And in the webinar, in this example, I've been kind of closing this tab, you can see, and then starting over from here. But while you're presenting, you can really treat it however you'd like, because you can additionally click this little tab here and be able to, for example, open a presentation. And so you can work within different tabs in your room as well. So it's really your preference for how you choose to kind of manage and go through different content. And so next is going to be the desktop sharing feature. So there's a really cool feature to let you actually share your desktop during the webinar. So that way you could let people see maybe a website that you're wanting to show them or some tool that you have on your computer. And so the desktop sharing does actually require the installation of a plugin. And so you want to go through that process. It's a 1, 2, 3 step installation guide that actually has, you can see it's prompting me to either download it or maybe I already have it, because I think I already have it on this computer as an example. But it's the first time you actually click the desktop sharing feature, you're going to be able to be immediately prompted to install the plugin. It's super simple, and then once you've got it enabled, you'll be able to share your desktop on here within your webinar, which is a pretty cool option. The next to that is the YouTube integration. This is a very simple, straightforward integration with YouTube. Simply, put in some search terms for a video you would like to share. And whenever you click on the video, it will instantly start playing here in the SharePod as well. And finally are your polls. This is a really cool feature as well, really good for engagement with your attendees. And so you can create basically a poll or a test for your attendees. And so a poll is pretty straightforward, kind of voting or yes or no type questions. But you also have this option for a test, which is where, you can actually assign scores to answers, maybe test, how many people have been paying attention to you. So it's really up to you how you'd like to kind of, be testing or polling your audience. But I can show you an example. So again, kind of like desktop sharing and uploading your files, it's a good idea to do this stuff, to set these things up before your webinar starts. That way, when your webinar is live, your documents are already uploaded, the desktop sharing plugin is already installed, and if you're wanting to do any polls, they're already created, and you'll just launch them. So I'm going to just create a poll called Favorite Soda, start adding questions, and I'm just going to do a 1-question poll. What is your favorite soda? In a single choice question, you can choose a type of questions, that you would like for it to be, and I'll say Pepsi or Coke. And I'm just going to finish because I just want to do 1 question here. And now you can see that this is launched, and so whenever I'm actually ready to go, I'll be able to launch this right here to open it for my attendees to vote with. So click open. And so now voting this screen is being presented to your attendees, but for them to actually vote and make a selection. And so you can give it a few seconds, and whenever you're finished conducting, the votes, you think everyone has voted, you can choose end voting, and you'll be presented with the results of how it all went. You can share the results with your attendees. You can even view some extra details for how specific people were voting if you wanted to see that in the meeting room. But of course, all of this is saved in the statistics that I'll show you in just a moment. So everything you're doing with the polls is going to be saved for offline use as well. So this is a great way you can, share results with people, really get people engaged, get them kind of thinking so they're not always just listening, but also have the option to do a poll as well and participate. So that's a pretty handy option as well. And now I just talked about a little bit the settings here, and this is a pretty straightforward process. You can just see the name of your webinar up here. And then there's these additional settings, layout settings. So as you see the room, as it opened up for us, this was just the default view. You have full control over the layout of the room and where different pods are located and what size they are. There are some preset layouts that just for, probably just, make it handier for you. They're preset. You can see if you click on them, automatically the room rearranges itself based on the layout that you chose, based on the type of, webinar you're wanting to have with your attendees. But additionally, you can do it all manually as well. So you can manually, let's say, minimize this, make this larger, or maybe you just want the share pod a bit smaller. You don't need all that space and you're going to make this bigger, or you want to just move it all around. So as you can see, I'm kind of making a mess of it, so I'll try to fix it. But you've got full control over the layout of your room, what pods are not there. So you remember I took the attendee list pod away. Maybe let's say I just don't even need that in my room. I'm not going to use that, so I just would take it off. Or you can bring it back by clicking on it again. And so when it's green, it's brought back to the room. And you can see there, it's right there. But of course, I made a mess. I'll try and fix it to a bit of a better look here. So that's a pretty important part of the settings, really. It's just, being able to choose how the room is actually laid out and what's included and where it's, located. And then again, remember this is where I was enabling or disabling particular pods from the room if you don't want them there. And this is a pretty handy option as well right here, the shared files option. A lot of times attendees would like access to download your PowerPoint or your PDF or whatever file that you're sharing with them, or any type of file. So you would just enable this right here. You can see it's green. And now you see this extra box here. You can add some files. So it could be the one that we already have uploaded that we're presenting, or of course upload a new one, maybe some other new document you want them to have. Click select. You can see that it's shared. And here, this is what your attendees will see. They'll see the option to actually download this file. So this is a pretty handy option as well if you'd like to be able to make this, your documents available for download. So that's the important things for your settings. Of course, you've got an info tab here, just info about your webinar, what it's named and who's the host and things like that. And then next to this is important, the recording feature. you can actually record your webinars so that you can be able to utilize them again, maybe upload them to YouTube later on for, future, plays by your attendees or anything that you'd like to do to share your recording. And so just before your webinar starts or before you want, your recording to actually begin, you of course just click this and it will load for just 1 second. And then you'll see that familiar flashing red light that you see for recording options to let you know that you are being recorded. So here we go. So we're recording. And so there's a couple of things to remember about recording space. Basically just that the amount of space that you have in your account to store your recording files is limited. And so it's limited based on the type of account that you have. So if it's GetResponse Webinars 100, you have 2 hours of recording space. If it's 500, you've got 4 hours. And if someone has 1,000 attendees, it's going to be 6 hours. But the important thing to remember about your recording space is that it's renewable. So if each time you got in the habit of having a webinar, you recorded your webinar, and then I'll show you, again, as I promised back when we were in the Manage Webinars page, you can actually just download the file and then delete it from your account, and you get the space back. So basically, the important thing to remember is that you do have the option to record your events, and it's just important to download and delete the files so you never run into trouble with, running out of recording space. So that's how you're going to enable recording, and you can just click it again to stop the recording, and it prompts you if you want to make sure you are. And so that's pretty simple there. We've got some language options here for the room, for the, if there's a particular language that you would like for the room panel to have translated into. And then next to this is going to be the Start Webinar. This is a pretty important button here. This is when you're ready to actually start your webinar. So let's say you've got everything all set up. Let's say we've got our presentation going. I enabled the audio settings that I want for myself. I've made my attendee list settings. My chat pod moderation is on. Okay, let me start recording again because that's pretty common. You'll usually want to start recording right before you open up the room. And then what you'll do, and also we can say that we've got some people in the waiting room anxiously awaiting the beginning of your webinar. So you simply click Start Webinar. And now everyone who was waiting for the webinar has been let into the room. You would see them as attendees here, and they'll be able to see this. They'll be able to see you if you're right there and be able to hear you. If you've got your audio enabled, remember it's flashing green. They can see your presentation, and you're ready to start going. And so it's just as simple as that. You'll go through all of your presentation methods, maybe open up a new tab and share your screen or show the whiteboard and just have a hopefully really successful event. And so when everything is all said and done and you're finished with your webinar and you say goodbye, you would simply click End Session and say yes. And then automatically everyone, you and all of your attendees are brought to this Thank You for Attending page. So just by default, everyone is brought here and everyone has exited the room. And so now are the kind of, other things I was mentioning in the Manage Webinars page about how you can actually access your statistics and the recordings. So, it'll take a few moments from when you close out the webinar room to be able to access these things, of course, because, it needs a few moments to load. But here is our webinar that we were just in. And so under the Actions menu is where you're going to be able to generate your PDF file. So this is where you're going to get the full view, all of the statistics, all of the responses to your polls, all of your attendee information, all of that's going to be available in a PDF you can download here. And then here's where you're going to download your recording. And so you can just simply download the recording, then delete it, and you'll see the prompt for that when it's available. Let's see if it's available just yet. There we go. Good deal. Because remember, I turned it on twice. So you would download the file. It downloads to your computer in the MP4 file format. So it's a very easy file format to use to upload to YouTube or any other type of video sharing service that you use and be able to share it with your audience. And then simply just delete the file. And it's not going to be taking up any more of your account space. And you'll be able to, continue recording your events. And just real briefly, I'll show you the statistics. We'll generate that, take a few moments there, and then we can be able to see what that looks like. So here we've got it ready. I'll click Download, and I can open that up here. So it just opens as a PDF file, and you can look through the different statistics that you've got available. Of course, I was my only attendee, so that's not, the most dynamic of statistics, but this is where you'll be able to see the options here. as well. All the statistics that were gathered, attendee summary, how anyone answered any polls, all of that would be here. That's a great idea to keep a good eye on your statistics as well. And so this is, that's the main deal here. That's the main thing to keep in mind when it comes to hosting your webinars and, what you'll be able to do afterward. So hopefully we all feel a bit more comfortable. We're ready, hopefully to host your first event. You feel familiar with the webinar room and the options you have, how you can actually set up your webinars and manage the page as well. You can view a, quick view of your statistics right here within the Manage Webinars page right afterward. And so I definitely want to open up now for a Q&A session with you guys on the chat pod. And again, you saw how we'll be managing that in the webinar room example. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today, for learning all about the new GetResponse webinars. We'll be happy to answer any of your questions following up. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Hey guys, it is Abby here with you now for the live Q&A session. Now I know we have been answering lots of your questions already, so I'm going to try and answer just a few more here live with you with my voice. So there's a lot of you guys out there with a lot of questions, and so I'm going to try to catch a few. I did see quite a few questions about the way that, for example, your participants be able to actually communicate with you with their voice or with their video. And basically, what you should keep in mind is that only 3 people maximum at a time can have their audio and or video enabled. And so if you remember back whenever I was showing you the attendee list pod and how when you click on someone's name, you'll be able to have some additional options and features that you would enable for them, like enabling their audio or their video. That's where you would do that. So for example, if I was going to ask one of you to ask your question vocally, I would find you in the attendee list pod, which I have just disabled for the moment. And then I would give you your voice privileges. You would enable the audio yourself, and then you would be able to ask me your question vocally. And so that's kind of a way you could play around that. And so let me see what else. Here's a good question. Yes, if you're using screen sharing, you do want to be careful if you are screen sharing and the actual webinar room that you're presenting in is available. They would be able to see these, any chats that you have coming up. So you may want to just make sure to keep that minimized and just have it on the screen that you're talking through, for example, or just keep that in mind, basically. Let's see what else. Anthony, can you be seen with a live talking head? Of course you can. I'm just choosing not to particularly for today, but you can choose to have an image or just a video. Let me see. You guys were so really nice about our webinars. I'm so happy to have you enjoyed it. I had a lot of questions about the pre-recorded webinar. I'll go ahead and answer those really quickly. So basically, a pre-recorded webinar would be, let's say, take a screen capture of your screen doing a presentation or some type of video where you're talking and going over your presentation. So you would save that as a video and then upload it via the presentation icon in the share pod. And then whenever you're ready to start your webinar, you would be able to open up that file as I showed you and then simply click play. And so the video would be playing with your audio and with, the video that you're showing. And then you could, for example, be doing the chatting or however you wanted to do that. So that's how pre-recorded would work. But they're not going to start automatically. There always has to be someone that is, the organizer or someone else that you're having help you join the webinar as the organizer, like I showed you in your GetResponse account when you go join as presenter. There needs to someone to always be there to click start session. It's not going to be able to start automatically, I'm afraid. So this is something that you should think about. So there is the option for pre-recorded, so you're not always maybe presenting live, but live, there is always going to need to be someone there. So I hope that does help. I see a question about, do you need a special headset? No, you can use your built-in camera, your built-in microphone on your computer, or if you plug in, a headset or headphones that you prefer, it would work with either one. Um, Automated replays, I see, was a question about. No, that's not automatic. We're going to send you the recording of this webinar as we've promised, but we're going to do that manually, of course, through a newsletter sent only through GetResponse. So it's not automatic, but it's super simple to be able to do that. Yes, chat moderation can be turned off. Remember, I was mentioning those ever special settings wheels in each of the pods. So remember with the chat pod wheel where you can enable chat moderation. And there were also quite a few questions during the webinar about how do you get the webinars, which is a great question. And so basically it just depends on what type of account that you have. If some of you have been with GetResponse for a few months, then you have our older plan, just a straight up email marketing plan. So you'd be able to add webinars to your account, choosing it to be an add-on. So you just go to My Account, Add-on, see add-on. Or it could be a good idea to just upgrade your account to one of our Pro plans, which include the webinars by default, along with some additional features like multi-user. So I know that's a lot of words to explain it, but basically, I think the easiest thing for you guys, if you do have questions about how to access it and add it to your account, is just to contact our support team. We've got 24/7 live chat. The telephone is also able to give them a call right now, and they can help you get it set up and go through the options with you, so you'll be able to choose. And Randall, yes, we are using GetResponse webinars, of course. What else? So this is a GetResponse webinars webinar in the flesh. See, I can do a couple more. There was a few questions about like having buy now buttons or CTAs included. Now we don't have an integration to have that included right within the webinar platform. Someone couldn't click on your presentation and be brought automatically to a buy now, unfortunately. So basically what we do to get around that is just to simply put a link in the chat pod, for example, for people to access a discount, or to make it a super simple link or something that they could follow that you put in your presentation. And let's see, I think there's a confusion. Steve, can viewers, of course, people can watch your webinars, but you need to upload it somewhere. And with GetResponse webinars, you have the capability to record your webinars, and then you would need to download the webinar recording from your GetResponse account and upload it, let's say, to YouTube or whatever video sharing service you prefer. And then you will need to somehow make this available, whether you're sending that link in a newsletter to your attendees or if you're making it available on your website. So it's up to you how they access it, but basically it's not automatic that through GetResponse automatically they can have access to a recording link. You will need to be downloading and uploading it somewhere, so facilitating that. And no, all of the attendees do not have to be on your GetResponse mailing list already, and that's what we hope they're not. GetResponse webinars and webinars in general, of course, are great for growing your list. So of course you'd want to include people who are already on your list to join and get some information from you, but you want to always have new people joining your webinars. That's why we really emphasize that you promote your webinars on social media, on your website. Maybe you're doing a webinar with a partner and you would like for them to, share with their list so you can build more subscribers. That's really what you want to focus on webinars. It's a great lead generation platform. So you're definitely not limited to just your GetResponse account. I think there's a question about, I've seen a few iPad and iPhone questions. We don't have the mobile capability just yet. We're working on it. I know it's, a high demand thing, so it is high on the list. So it's not available just yet. So that's why if some of you weren't able to join, this is going to be why. And let's see what else. And there's been a few questions about what does GetResponse webinars 500 mean, or 1,000, or excuse me, 100 or 500 mean. That means the number of attendees you can that can join your webinar. It's not the number of webinars you can hold in a month. So if you have the GetResponse webinars 100, that means that you can have at any given webinar up to 100 people join your webinar and attend. And that 101st person who missed out just barely would be in the waiting room, as some of you guys were, until, let's say, someone left your webinar. Number 100 left, then they could take their spot. And that's the same with 100 as well. So that's how it'll work. And a question about, can moderated chat filter to specific people? Unfortunately not. It is pretty just a one for all. But if you do remember in the chat pod, you can start private chats with people if you wanted, and you can do that through the moderated chat tool that you saw. And Tom, instruction on how to make a paid webinar. I think our support team would be easier to actually kind of lead you through that, because I mentioned it just a bit briefly in the chat pod, where, a scenario I can imagine would be that when you send invitation through GetResponse, you include the PayPal Buy Now button, and you have in your account, you've got something set up for this webinar. And then whenever you're alerted by PayPal, for example, that someone has purchased, then you would need to contact them manually yourself, however, with the password or something like that, because I assume you will want to keep it private to make sure not just anyone can join. So at that particular event, you would want it to be password protected. And then once you get a notification that someone has purchased, you would provide them with the password. But of course, again, our support team can help you figure that out. How often can you hold a webinar? There's not a limit. It's kind of like your newsletters. There's not a limit on how many newsletters you can send with GetResponse Relay. It's just the number of attendees that we've got. Let me see. I know there's a lot of questions I missed, and so have no fear. If I have missed a question, as I said, 24/7 live chat are fully equipped to answer all of them well. And so you can just scoot on over there and be able to do that. There's a question, are attendees required to download anything? No, they're not. I mean, hopefully they have Flash on their computer. So if they were going to have audio enabled, that there's going to be a Flash component. But it's really meant to be a super straightforward web-based service where they can click the link and be able to join into the room. Certainly, Anthony, you could use this as a kind of a class atmosphere if you wanted to. Certainly. It's totally up to you guys how you want to manage the webinars and how you want to utilize them, whether it's for one-on-one trainings with someone where you share your screen with desktop sharing, and then you could give someone control of your desktop so they could get hands-on experience with the tool that you have on your computer. Or maybe it's something really big where there's 100 or 500 or more people that you're giving a presentation to, or it's a class and people are listening and you create a poll in the form of a test to make sure they were paying attention. It really is up to you how you guys manage them. And the webinar will not automatically close itself out. And so you won't be kicked off if you promise people it'll be an hour. You'll click end session, which I'll do here just a few minutes, and then we're all going to be leaving at the same time. Sure, Susie. So I know a lot of people have the recording whenever they want. So again, like I said, you would just decide how to facilitate that for your attendees, maybe putting it on your website or sending them an email with the link. And then, of course, anytime they click the link, because let's say you upload it to YouTube, it'll be available. And no, if you're using top sharing, your attendees cannot do anything, clicking or doing anything on that. You have to give one particular attendee or presenter the specific option to have access to, share your screen. And of course, we have tons of resources about the webinar. So when we say goodbye today, please know you're not just, swimming out there alone. We already have video tutorials that go through basically what we just went through with this webinar, step by step, a PDF manual if you want to view it on text. And so I've mentioned it just a little bit already. I'll put it in that pod again. support.getresponse.com. That's how you access our live chat team and give us a call, but also that's where all of our learning materials are. And we work really hard to keep our learning center really robust and, full with the information that you need. So go to the webinar section at that link there, and you'll be able to, view all of the materials that we've got for webinars. And if you don't see the option in your billing panel, again, please just contact support. There could be some reason, for example, if you're got an older plan, it just didn't reset itself properly in your billing panel or in your add-on section, and so that's fine. Matthew, yes, these are our servers. These are GetResponse servers that the webinars are hosted on, just like newsletters and things like that. And we don't have a dial-in feature. available. So if someone wants to provide audio or then it is just through the computer right now. Let me see if there's something else that's been pretty common. There was a question about downgrading. Sure, you can definitely downgrade if you start using GetResponse Pro and you're not um, finding that you need all those features. You could certainly downgrade. Just contact our. And I did see a question about reading your notes while doing a presentation. Unfortunately, not really. If you're going through, let's say, a PDF or a PowerPoint file, you'd be able to see like thumbnails of what's coming up with your presentation. I think you saw that in my example in this webinar today, but unfortunately, you may just need to keep some notes on the side or something like that. And I know there were requests for branding, and so of course that is something we all would like to do. And so I don't have a date on that yet, unfortunately, but I know that is something that is being asked for quite a lot. And so we are hoping to be able to get that going. And the pricing all just depends on how you're choosing to utilize the webinars. And so again, I would just hope you'll go to the pricing page or go to the upgrade page in your account and you'll be able to see a full list. I'm not detailing them out right now because there's a ton of ways that you can actually customize how you'll access the webinars, whether it's an add-on or it's an upgrade to your account. So I would just say check it out there. It depends, Anthony, on how you want to invite attendees. I mean, for example, by default, if you send the invitation through GetResponse through that process I showed, there's a button there that already has the link. But also, when you're creating your webinar, you see that whenever you give the room a name, that there is a link under there. That's you could simply just put that link out there on your website or on your Facebook pages or however you wanted to do it, and people will be able to join and register that way as well. Okay, we have time for just a couple more questions before we go. Let me see. Can attendees mute the audio? Well, if they just, mute their, turn off their speakers or mute their speakers, they could mute it in that way, but they can't mute for anyone else. And thank you guys again for the very kind compliments on the service. We really have tried to make something good for you guys. Oh, but what if a Skype call comes in? Well, really, we would recommend that no one actually has Skype enabled because GetResponse webinars are web-based. You want to really reserve some bandwidth on your computer to be able to really maximize, your experience with the webinar itself. So I usually recommend people just to disable Skype if they're going to be on a webinar. So that's kind of how I would handle that one. And yes, this is a new service from GetResponse. We just launched this there around Black Friday, I think, is when we did it into Thanksgiving. And so, yeah, this is a new GetResponse feature, certainly, webinars. It's all new. And yes, I bet telephone access will be planned pretty far in the future, perhaps, because it is a bit tricky with getting all of telephone lines set up and et cetera. But I do know that's a way people are used to running webinars, and so we're definitely looking into that as well. Yeah, and mobile, again, mobile is coming, so it's not available yet. Unfortunately, the GetResponse webinars are not compatible with mobile devices yet, but it is obviously top of the list, and we are working on it. So yes, any moment, hopefully within, the first of this year, within the coming weeks, a couple of months or something. Of course, I will not be able to give you an exact time. We simply just don't have it, but it is on top of the list for our IT guys and everything. Yeah, we're going to keep working on the features. This is a thing about GetResponse is we're always working to improve all of our features constantly and make them work. But we wanted to get the webinars out there because as it is right now, it's totally usable feature. And we've already hosted several really successful events ourselves, of course, and have some others as well. And then we'll continue to optimize it. And just one final question. Sorry, guys, if I didn't get to you. But yes, when attendees register, whenever you set up your webinar,
you'll be able to dictate which campaign your registrants should be added to. So yes, when people register to join your event, they will then be saved as a subscriber in your mailing list. And so this is something to keep in mind. That's why you need to dictate whenever you're setting up your campaign under that access and subscription link, what campaign you want that to go through. So again, thank you guys so much for being such an enthusiastic crowd, expressing some of your concerns, your needs, your wants, and also that you really do like that, okay? And so we really appreciate you guys. Again, if I did not answer all of your questions, because you guys had some great ones, please reach out to my wonderful support team 24/7. They've got all the answers. And also as well, we've got all of the materials you'll need, video tutorials, PDF manuals, FAQs. So please take a look at all of that, and we will be more than happy to help you out. So again, I appreciate you guys. You took an hour out of your busy Thursday to learn about GetResponse webinars, and we couldn't be more thankful for that. And though some of you mentioned the email marketing success webinar, please join me next Thursday for that webinar. So same time as we'll be here, a webinar again with GetResponse and with me next Thursday. So any of you kind of new to GetResponse, new to email marketing, want a refresher, join us next week, okay? And it'll be at the same time, 12 p.m. EST. So again, without further ado, thank you. Please have a good rest of your day, afternoon, evening, wherever you're located in the world. And hope we hear from you soon. Bye-bye.